Hello, everyone. This is Gary Allen. I'll be your speaker today. Thanks for coming. I wanted to check in with Nikki. Do you want me to just dive in, Nikki, or do you want to say something before we get started? You can just put that in the chat if you like. All right. Hearing nothing, I'm going to go ahead. Oh, feel free to dive in. Good. All right, thanks everybody. I'm really excited to be with you, the Gateway chapter today. Um, we're going to talk about unlocking the three pillars of financial excellence for your law firm. And we're going to do that in a story format. So here we are. We've got our fairy tale begun. Once upon a time, there was a law firm that was much like yours. We'll be talking about a 20-lawyer business and employment law firm called Dalton Finch. It's not a real firm, but it represents a lot of the issues we see with law firm financial performance. And they have small to mid-sized business clients. Um, they're suffering from a lot of problems. So they have flat profits, high partner burnout, rising associate attrition, and what you will see is a transformation of that firm with a 92% increase in profit over 18 months. And this is how they did it. So there were two unlikely leaders in this firm. Felix Finch was the founder and the managing partner. He's a really great lawyer. And I've worked with a lot of lawyers like him over my career. Doesn't really want to lead a law firm if you really, if you bought him a couple of cocktails. He likes to practice law, which is a lot like a lot of lawyers and frankly, a lot of managing partners that you see. Sharon McDonald is the office manager. She, like many office legal administrators, has an HR background. This is her first job in a law firm, and she's fairly new in this job. And they have a crisis. They want, like the lawyers in the firm, like Felix, they want to have total focus on landing their clients, winning cases, closing deals. And but the firm has a bunch of distractions. So their billing is really slow and full of errors. They have lag on their collections. Their overhead is bloated. They have fights over compensation and so on, which, those things might sound pretty familiar to a lot of you. That's very common in law firms. So they have a rising star in this law firm. Her name is Anna Wang, and she is polishing her resume because of this dissatisfaction she feels about how the firm is being run. She may not experience it in those terms, but she's just kind of generally unhappy. Now, at Dalton and Finch, you've got another problem, which many of you may experience, which is you've got a lot of inertia in your firm. The lawyers want to practice law. Sharon, she's herding cats all day, like I know that many of you are. And, it's just really hard to change. People just, if something's been done a certain way, people want to just keep doing it that way. And there's a lot of fear and skepticism that protect legacy systems in a firm like this. So it turns out that something is always more important than making changes that would improve the firm. And then disaster strikes. So Anna Wang has just sent her resume to Dalton and Finch's biggest competitor. And, that might not seem like much for a senior associate or younger partner, but a lot of times that can be the catalyst for much bigger problems, even the implosion of a firm. Because this is like the most talented lawyer in the whole place and the future of the firm. So Felix and Sharon know the gravity of this moment. and they meet, they can't settle on an answer given all of the other politics and everything that are going on. So things look pretty bleak at this firm. And you have to wonder if her departure might help to topple the firm. So, I want you to start thinking about how this relates to your firm. So, have any of you ever faced a situation like this? And, what would you do under these circumstances? Now, I know people can be reluctant to dive in, but if you want to say something on the chat or on the Q&A, feel free and we can make this more of a conversation. But just start that rolling around in your mind, like, this can actually happen in a firm. How do I prepare for it? What do I do about it? So then Felix returns to his desk and he's sitting there lost in despair. And all of a sudden he hears a voice. This might have been in his emails, but it says, Felix, the firm needs to change. Attend the 3 Pillars webinar. So Felix takes that insight and they come to one of my webinars. I've just to give you a little bit of a sense of my background, I've seen a lot of this before. So I was a 35-year practicing lawyer. I retired completely from that in 2024. I early in my career experienced 2 implosions of firms, really great lawyers, really great people, not particularly well-run firms. And so you know, I saw these firms break into pieces. The last one, I was sitting at home on a Saturday afternoon, and the office managing partner called me up and told me I didn't have a job and that the firm was closing on Monday. I had a 6-month-old baby to feed at that time. So the good news there was that I was able to land at a firm that was exceptionally well run. And in fact, for all the hundreds and thousands of law firms that I've worked with since I started LeanLaw, I don't know that I've found one that's better. And I experienced that. Both, financially and emotionally. So Julie has raised her hand at this point. Let me see if I can. Where did she go? I was going to give her a chance to talk, but Julie, if you have a question, just put it in the Q&A. Okay, so we're having some fun in the chat about this sounds familiar. So anyway, I had I landed at a firm that was really well run, and I experienced that both emotionally and in financially, and was able to grow a big practice and practice happily for 30 years there. And I want to help share the insights that I learned about how to do that. Along the way, I had a lot of frustration with legal software. So I founded LeanLaw, which is a law firm financial software. And we have a mission to help law firms become better businesses. So I hope you gain a little bit out of that today. So Sharon asks me, so how do we get past all the chaos that we're experiencing? And I said, the first thing is you've got to understand where you are. And that's so you fill out an easy way to do that is to fill out what I call a law firm financial report card. Now I'm going to do a little bit of a tricky share here, so hopefully I won't lose that. I'm going to stop sharing that, and I'm going to share the report card so everybody can see that. All right, so the law firm financial report card just allows you to take some basic financial data about your firm and plug it in to a spreadsheet. You all should have received this before the webinar, and then it will tell you where you stand relative to industry standards for your basic financial performance. And I like to think of this as it's the warning lights for your business. It doesn't have to be perfect. You know, the numbers don't have to be exact. You don't have to monitor it all the time. Just, you know, kind of a occasional check-in is a good way to use something like this. And it's, you know, helps lead you to other things. So again, it's just a good way to uh, check the warning lights and see where you are. So if you can see the screen at all, it's got basic information about firm size, you know, kind of your expected hours and billable hours, average rates. And what you see here in the numbers when you come down to the second part, which has the metrics, is um, these numbers are actually the actual numbers from my firm from about 10 to 15 years ago. And the numbers that we're tracking, which we'll get into more in a second, are the billable capacity of the firm, the utilization, the realization, collection, and overhead, and of course the profit at the bottom of that. Because law firm profit is just revenue minus expense. And this allows you to go from your capacity to your collections minus your overhead and give you the profit of the firm. You can see that my firm was doing pretty well. We were still coming out of the Great Recession a little bit at this time. Um, and we'll talk more about, yeah, see, Kara is saying, can you explain how to fill it out more? And we'll talk about that in just a second. But yes, so you're going to fill out all of the green segments here, right? So your realization, your collection, which is dollars billed, collection is dollars collected. Your overhead, we can talk about how to calculate that. And then it gives you these numbers and percentages. So you can see um, we made most of the goals here. Most of the benchmarks are here. This is where the firm actually is. Okay, so that's what that looks like. Then you've got this second section where these are things you can say, okay, now I know where I stand. Let's try some improvements if we wanted to improve the profitability of our fixed fee matters, for example. And we put a bunch of it in here that you can just check or uncheck. And then over on the right here, you can see how each of those affect the profitability of your firm. So, you know, if my firm were to implement all of these, they would be straight A's across the board if that was actually realistic. So that's the report card. Let's go back and see see how that applied to our hypothetical firm here. So I'm going to stop sharing that one again. And we'll share the other one, share the main screen. Okay, everybody should have that back up. Let me just double check. Okay, yes, there it is. So let's use Dalton and Finch as the example of how you use that report card. As I say, if you know, it's easy to fill it out. You just use your numbers based on the green the green squares in there, the green cells. So the first one of them is your capacity. So that's how much you can bill if everybody bills at budget, essentially. So if you're not doing a budget per se, you can estimate those. But at Dalton and Finch, it was 1,800 hours a year times $300 an hour is $540,000. And we're going to say, okay, that's fine. That's for best in class. You might be able to do more with that, but let's just assume those are the same. Then utilization is the amount of time that is actually spent on billable matters. And there are two ways to calculate that. One is based on the total hours that somebody works, because not everything you work is going to be billed, right? So typically a firm will, expect lawyers will work about 50 hours a week. That's 2,400 hours a year, and maybe 1,500 to 1,800 billable hours for a budget there. So then you just multiply that by the average billable rate. That's one way to get it. My firm did an actual budget. And Christy is asking, is that 540,000 per lawyer? It is. And that may be too high for your market or for your firm, or too low. It varies a lot across firms. But there's a whole process you can go through to address your capacity. Then your realization is how much of that actually gets billed. So this Dalton and Finch is kind of an average firm. So they're at 83%. So by the way, they have 78% billable utilization relative to that $540,000. So that's and best in class firm would be pretty close to that, say 95%. Realization also 95% is best in class. Collection, they collected 89%. That's totally average for the industry. 95% is where you should be able to get. Overhead at 48%. And this does not include compensation to the producers. It's a best practice to keep that out and see so you can determine whether the producer is actually profitable. So they're at 48%. Best in class is around 30%. And I've seen as low as 15 or 20. So it is possible to do that. So when you do all of that math, what you wind up with is a profit per attorney of about 118,000 at Dalton and Finch, which is about industry average. If you can hit the best in class metrics, you can triple that. So it's actually over $300,000 per attorney. And when you multiply that over a lawyer's career, the comparison, the difference is about $8 million per lawyer. So that's why it's called the $8 million wake-up call. And when you think about Dalton and Finch's story, it's most pressing in why should somebody like Anna, who probably has a lot of choices and may have a best-in-class firm choice to go to, where she can make 3 times as much money for the same work. So that's the question this firm has to answer, and how to get to a better result. So, that best-in-class firm is outperforming by $200,000 a year per lawyer and over $8 million over the course of a career. So then Felix and Sharon are sitting down and going, wait a minute, not all of our problems have to do with money. I mean, at least we don't experience them that way. So if we have partners feuding over compensation, that's not just about your basic profitability, but it does affect that in a huge way. Because if the numbers are 3 times as big for everybody, they're not going to want to fight over the little pieces of the pie as much. So whenever you have weak profits, it's going to make all of your other problems worse. And if you have strong profits, that makes all your other problems better. So it's really a foundational thing to create a better, happier law firm. All right, so more thoughts. I want to give you a little more homework here, another question to take home. So when you see those numbers, and I don't know how many of you are, best in class or average or somewhere in between, did any light bulbs go off for you? Did you say, okay, now I see I'm making some connections with some other things that's happening, or I see some places that we need to focus. So um, put that on your homework list to think about. So for Felix and Sharon, that was their time to roll up their sleeves. And that leads us to part two, which are those three pillars of financial excellence. So, and those pillars are efficient processes, productive people, and product and service alignment. So it's people, it's process, people, and product. So we're going to they started looking at their processes. So they had a lot of broken processes in this firm that were costing them a lot. And that's going to show up mostly in your overhead, but it could also show up in other parts of the firm. So they were chronically slow in amount of their billable work. Their invoices were delayed. The collection rate was low. You can actually do this as a rep. Their billable work was chronically slow. Their invoices delayed. Their collection rate low. There was frustration around compensation and partners hoarding origination and associates disengaging or leaving the show. So with my apologies to Hamilton. Uh, and so great lawyers can't thrive when the firm has a broken vibe. So that was what they were dealing with at Dalton and Finch. But then once they started to deal with it, you ran into that inertia. And that's a problem that many firms have. You've tried it before, it's just going to be another cluster, that didn't work. And the way Dalton and Finch decided to address this was with data, because data can help you overcome resistance. And we will talk a little more about other ways of change management, but this was sort of out of the gate. So they were able to show that they were losing up to 120,000 a year because there were meetings on their calendars that weren't billed. They were losing $60,000 to write-downs. They were losing 40,000 in overdue HR. So there's enough money to worry about, enough money to dive into these processes. And that overcame the initial resistance. So then their path to better processes, the first part is to create a plan. And in your plan, you want to be smart about it. You may have 25 processes that are broken in your firm, but you can't take all that at once. So, maybe you pick the one or two or three processes that are most painful to people, or maybe the most expensive to the firm if you think you can really show a return on investment here, which you should be able to. And have a success. You really need a success when you start on process improvement. So just pick one or two and walk through that. Then you need to also map out what you want your process to be and compare it to the capabilities of your software compared to your needs. Um, and there's a whole nother webinar about how to do all of that. But you want that careful step-by-step plan that's going to get you from where you are to success. The second thing that they did was they used what we call uh, best-in-class software approach. So a lot of firms pick an all-in-one, what they call an all-in-one software, because gee, that's convenient. It does everything. But in my experience, that just often doesn't work nearly as well as you hope, because the software does a lot of things okay and does only one or two things really well. So you wind up, paying for a lot that you don't wind up using, or you underutilize. So instead of that, the alternative is to pick the best of everything. And we'll talk a little bit more about all of these. And then finally, to manage the change. So just a little bit more about the plan. Dalton and Finch assigned a process leader, never a committee, always a leader. In this case, it was Sharon. They used the existing pain points that they had to define priorities, as I mentioned. They mapped the key workflows, their billing, collections, intake, and reporting are what they focused on. And they mapped software requirements to the capabilities for that. So that's how you do a plan. Then here's what that best-in-class software looks like. So, everybody's using Microsoft 365. So get the most you can out of that. It can cover a lot of ground. Obviously, email and calendar are central there, you're creating your documents in there, but they also have Teams and SharePoint, which can meet a lot of uh, case management requirements for smaller firms a lot of times, and they have Power Automate for process automation and so on. And then they used QuickBooks Online, which is the dominant accounting software for small to mid-sized firms. Has a lot of people, a lot of people out there who know how to use it. A lot of reasons to think about that. And legal customization, what do you know? They used LeanLaw to help with automate their billing, trust accounting, comp tracking, leads billing, etc. And then Net Documents for documents and knowledge management, e-signatures, etc. And then that, because you've used these foundational tools that have robust APIs, you can add docketing software really easily and other specialty practice and financial applications. So that was their software philosophy and approach. And let's see. So how it worked out was they had an integrated accounting and billing when they were done. Pretty deeply integrated between QuickBooks and LeanLaw. More automated billing, trust accounting, and comp tracking. Net Documents implemented for secure document management. Teams for document and client communications, and standardized intake via Microsoft Forms. So a lot of opportunities for improved automation and productivity there. And then they had a good change management program. So, if you've been through this type of change, you know how difficult it can be. But you're not the first firm to ever do that. So there are some really well-established methods out there, including this one called ADKAR, which is there's a company called ProSci uses this, and you create awareness around the problem. So what Dalton and Finch did was that they shared real client complaints about their processes, about not getting bills for 60 to 90 days after the work was done, etc. And then they created a desire for change. So they calculated that wasted time per role and the impact on overhead. They created the knowledge that people needed in order to change. So they made standard operating procedures and trained on tools. Then they created the ability to change. So that was, and they used peer coaching, which I'm really high on, which is you develop advocates within your firm who know how to do the new process and they help teach others. And it's less expensive because you don't have to pay the vendor to do that. And then finally, reinforcement. So they had monthly metrics that they reviewed, and importantly, peer pressure among partners to not adopt change. It's usually the oldest and most experienced who have the hardest time changing. So that's ADKAR. That's how you make the change happen on that. So again, I want you to a little homework for y'all, which is, if you were to think about the processes in your firm, which process change would most benefit your firm? Is there one thing you could do to get this ball rolling that would make a big difference and give momentum for other changes? And if you want to ask about any, feel free to speak up in the chat if you want to have more of a conversation there. All right, so that was step one for Dalton and Finch. So they got their processes working and started making progress there. The second step is aligning your people. So sort of the symptoms that Dalton and Finch saw was that they had origination that was hoarded by two senior partners. So, they had some big clients, and younger people felt like, oh, I can never compete for origination because I'm always running into, I have to help with those clients, and I'm always running into those relationships. They didn't have any compensation transparency, so there was a lot of distrust and lack of understanding about how people were compensated. And it was frankly done on a kind of ad hoc basis. And then the associates in the firm really lacked clarity on, what does my career look like in this firm? What is Felix going to do 10 years from now? And, does the firm survive when when he retires? And then the oh, you know what moment is that Anna Chen has scheduled an interview with the competitor. So you're starting to bleed off your best talent and starting to have some real problems there. So the keys to a people strategy in your firm, this is just something that was really struck me when I moved into my ultimate law firm, is that how important the culture was. That and it doesn't have, there isn't a formula for that culture. I mean, there's a little bit, but the most important thing is that you have a clear culture, it's authentic, and it's shared by everybody, so that people know what the firm stands for and really what it will do when the chips are down. And culture is all about values, and creating a culture that's authentic to the values of the people who are there, particularly the founders that you can build around. And the values that really matter for the productivity and financial success of the law firm, in my opinion, are fairness, trust, and accountability. So, people have to feel like the pie is going to be divided up fairly and that they can trust their partners in that respect, and that people aren't running around making a different deal with the managing partner. And then the final part is accountability, that people feel like they feel responsible for the financial success of their practice. And they feel that financially, along with other things, because they, if they don't produce, they don't get paid in the same way. And you want your compensation system that aligned with those values. So if you have a misalignment there where people feel like, gee, they told me that if I came in here and worked hard, that I would be treated fairly. And that's just not happening. I've got the same salary I had 2 years ago, and so is making more than me. That just goes down a very bad path. Um, I'm a big fan of objective compensation systems that, outline those compensation factors very clearly and, pay people based on, very important things, which are who brings in the clients, who does the work to some extent, who manages the work, things like that. Um, you know, I, there may be other systems that work, but I just have seen a lot more success with an objective system. And then the final thing that needs to be done for a successful people strategy is you must have some succession planning at least underway. It doesn't have to be done and wrapped up. People just have to be comfortable that the firm has a future. If your firm does not have a future, if it's not evergreen, to use that term, then why is somebody like Anna going to stick around and wait and see if something is around when Felix retires? So these are all the things that Dalton and Finch took into consideration in creating their people strategy. And what they wound up with is an objective model where for every dollar that came in, 70% went to the working attorney, 5% to client management, 15% to origination, 10% to an equity pool. Pretty similar to what I lived with, and it was very successful for 30 years. We had dozens of partners who grew up and built big practices and became successful under it. They have LeanLaw, so they have a dashboard for the transparency of this and can calculate and distribute the money in this system easily. They gave associates a clear path to partner, and then growing understanding as they move along of what partnership means and how it works for them over their career. And they launched a succession plan so that people would know what happened after Felix and Judy Dalton, who is the other senior partner and name partner, when they retired. All right, so that's people strategy. All right, so now more homework. So just to size up in your mind, what's your firm's level of trust and accountability? So those, I really feel like those are kind of very at the very heart of it. And if you have concerns about those things, I think that's a place where you need to dig in and take some action because that's can be really corrosive to a firm. All right, now we're on to step 3 in the 3 pillars, and that is redesigning your products and services. Now, this was all a little less important when I was practicing law, but it's become much more critical over the last few years and will become much more so as we start to see the impact of AI on law firm products and services. So for Dalton and Finch, all of their services were billed hourly. They had no packages, no subscriptions, nothing like that. They had, spent a fair bit of time on billing disputes, wrote off quite a bit of their time. And it created some secondary uh, features that were difficult and harmful for the firm, in that they had a lot of business consultative clients, and they didn't like to call the lawyers when they, just wanted to have some basic consulting because they didn't like the idea that the meter was going to go on for that. So there was hesitation to call unless there was a crisis. Of course, when things are in a crisis, they're much more expensive and more difficult to deal with, which lessens the client's satisfaction with the whole thing. So, they were creating other problems from themselves beyond just uh, the billing and beyond just the billing dispute itself. So Kara is saying e-billing is the bane of my existence. Now, Kara, are you talking about leads billing and uploading to client systems? Oh, okay. Yeah. And I don't know what system you're using, but okay, interesting. So, you should have a system that can automatically produce those leads invoices. And the damn 20 million different platforms. Yeah, yeah, I hear you. So there's a process to focus on. Interesting. Okay, so that was where Dalton Finch was. Um, and so there's a really interesting process or tool out there called design thinking, which is uh, a way of thinking through new products. And it's commonly used in the tech industry and starting to be used more in law. And the idea of this is just to build your services around what your clients need. Um, so, it begins with the shocking idea that you should talk to your clients about your services, their satisfaction with them, and how they might be improved. And then identify those pain points in your service delivery and redesign those around the outcomes that your clients really want. Then you test and you iterate, and then you price based on value, not on time. Now, for those of you who are talking about, leads billing and those kinds of things, to the extent those clients will accept alternate forms of like a fixed fees and other forms. I mean, that solves the need for a lot of lead stuff because leads is all about analyzing the amount of time that people use, that people spend on things. So maybe you get some secondary benefits out of this sort of thing. So, if you'd be surprised if you don't need to guess about what your clients are thinking or what they think would be better. They will tell you, and they will be happy to hear about uh, about that you are thinking about different ways to produce your revenue. There's this very interesting conversation going on the chat. Let's see. So Patty is now saying, does anyone accept virtual credit card payments? Um, Virtual credit card payments. What is that like from Venmo or something? So I don't understand how you're receiving that. It's a MasterCard, but it's sent without, is it on your posted to your website where you're for that your credit card installation on your website, or is it something that came from the invoice? Received via email with instructions how to retrieve the money. Oh, that's interesting. That I have not seen. All right, I'm going to let that kind of take its way on the chat for a minute here. All right, so what Dalton and Finch came up with were some new service offerings. So they came up with a flat fee HR essentials audit. So they have business clients and just tell them about auditing their hiring and firing processes. Very valuable thing for a business, I can tell you. They had a general counsel subscription for startups at a relatively low price to build those relationships at a price that didn't break the bank for a young company. And then they just had a startup legal bundle, which includes creating a corporation, um, potentially some financing related to it, other basic corporate documents for $5,000. So all of that was, based on the feedback from their clients and, had a very good chance of, uh, of acceptance there. Now, on the marketing side, they focused on, okay, what's the right kind of marketing for our practice? And this is a B2B practice. And it was so the secret there is that it's mostly based on referrals. So if you have somebody selling you marketing services like for pay-per-click or digital marketing devices of various kinds, that's usually not going to be very valuable for a business-to-business firm. For a business-to-consumer firm, a PI firm or family law, that's a different story. But for Dalton and Finch, they wanted effective ways to generate new clients based on referrals and relationships. So they increased the LinkedIn visibility for all their partners. They increased speaking invitations. They got AI assistance with networking opportunities like thank you notes and follow-up meetings. And they updated their website with plain language offers that their potential clients would understand. So now, just thinking about your firm, your homework is to think about, are you selling what your clients really need? And what pain points are you seeing based on the types of product offerings you're doing, which may just be billable hours, or on the bills or whatever, are you seeing those pain points that say, hey, wait a minute, maybe we should think about having a different kind of product that we're selling? All right, so now I want to talk about the results that Dalton and Finch were able to achieve. And these are, indicative of what we see in a lot of things. So when you talk about process, they were able to see their realization increase from 82 to 87%, collections from 89 to 95%, based on just a better billing process, things that we talked about, reduced their invoicing time by 20 hours a month, their document support time by 20 hours a month. And those seem like relatively small incremental improvements, but their profit per lawyer increased $61,000 as a result of that, and the firm profit increased by $740,000. So, those incremental improvements can add up to a lot, is really the point of this. And then you put process improvements in place that all pay off as your utilization and realization. So the amount of time you spend on billable matters and the amount you bill, those are all improved by the process improvements you put in place. And they were able to get their invoices sent within 3 days rather than in 30 days, which was their old process. So that improved their cash flow by $440,000 a month. So that whole investment, 12 months to roll it out, 25,000 cash on consultants and other things, some additional software, a bunch of some administrative time. So cost about $75,000, but they hit break even on that in a couple of months. All right, let's talk about your people outcomes. So they were able to settle Maya down and get her to stay. She was promoted to partner, and she is now trending to $1 million practice. They increased their firm-wide utilization from 45 to 55% with their new compensation system, particularly provided a good incentive. Their unwanted associate turnover went to 0. They now have an internal leadership pipeline that's active. They're starting to train people for the future. And their named partner, Judy Dalton, was able to step back smoothly and enter into retirement. And all of that, again, about 12 months to do that, $25,000 in a similar cash and time investment, and it broke even in less than 6 months for the firm. So, there are some costs here, even if you're not buying new software. You may need consulting assistance, you may need other things, and certainly will need some time investment in order to get these gains. But, I think what they're doing here is typical. And then for their product, they were able to increase the percentage of fixed fee or subscription matters to 30%. Utilization increased from 55 to 60. Realization went up again. And their net promoter score, if you're not familiar with that, it's a score of your client satisfaction, is up 40 points. And, a similar break even on their investment in just a few months. So just recapping all of that, 3 to 6 months, they've streamlined their billing and collections and their document management. 6 months, flat fee service launch. 12 months, a new compensation model. In 18 months, they're increased their profit by $2.1 million a year, which is an 8x ROI in year 1. So, and made a lot of progress to being best in class here. Now, I want to say, even with all of those things they did, those remarkable improvements, they still have a ways to go in order to be best in class. But they got halfway there with this investment and, have laid the foundation for everything else. So when I lay out numbers like that, if you're able to achieve those things for your firm, what would that mean for your firm? That's kind of your homework question there is, what real difference would that make to people in your firm if you were able to, double the profit over the course of 12 to 18 months? So just coming to the epilogue here, thinking about Felix and Sharon. So one of the things Felix learned through this process is that it was actually better for him to stop hoarding origination. So he started rolling that downhill to the people who are actually working on his clients and helping them to, start to develop those relationships, because he's going to want to share an equity share of this firm that somebody will buy one day. And so that was part of how he accomplished that. So now he's got a much more of a purpose as a leader, and he understands the benefit of management and leadership in the firm. And this was so Sharon, as a result of this, was able to get out of survival mode. So she became the, kind of operational heartbeat of this firm. She understood much better why. Um, she was doing what she was doing. And so together, these two leaders, so, you might call Sharon an integrator and Felix a visionary in the language of the entrepreneurial operating system, or EOS. So they built a great team with a great culture and a lot of momentum, doing fairly simple things. That's kind of my bottom line message is you can't do super complicated management in a law firm. It's just, people want to be focused on doing the work for clients. So they don't have a lot of tolerance for the rest of that. And so that's the end of my story there. And so they lived happily ever after, as they do in all such stories. So let's see, I'm going to check the comments here. Christy said, any chance you have one of these report cards or a cheat sheet you can use to evaluate grade an individual partner's current business or practice stats? Interesting. I think Christy, the question that you need to answer is what is your firm value in terms of what that partner is producing. So, typically if you have an objective compensation system, we'll do something like we talked about earlier, which is you pay, you have some level of you pay of the to the finder, minder, and grinder, to use the tail and door criteria. So to the originator, to the working attorney, and to the responsible attorney, and just have to decide what's important. So my firm specifically said, well, the most important thing is we've got to compensate the people who do the work. So they got the bulk of it. Now they had to carry an overhead load against that. So, but say 75% of that dollar went to the working attorney. And then you have to compensate the rainmaker, the finder. So that was 15% off the top. And then rather than compensate responsible attorneys, which we felt was adequately compensated by the working and the originating, we compensated an equity component, which helped create a common sense of purpose and a longevity in the firm. So you might just take some, you need to establish some value for those criteria and maybe other things if you wanted to compensate for, management responsibilities or marketing or whatever, the important things are. Divide those up, take the lawyer's production. So you need to know what their origination, responsible attorney, and working attorney numbers are, plug those in, and then subtract overhead. And that's the whole idea of, or one of the big things you get out of a objective compensation is an understanding based on that, like, what can you pay somebody and still be profitable? So if they have $500,000 in working attorney and $1 million in origination, obviously there's, they don't get paid twice for originating the stuff that they also work. But in any case, so let's say let's just take those numbers, 500,000, then a certain 15% of the origination gives you 650. And then, let's say they get another well, let's leave the equity out of it. Just that 650, and then you've got overhead of 200,000 for that lawyer. So that's 650 minus 200 is 450,000, would be a fair compensation based on that valuation of that production. So that's how I'd go about that. I don't have a spreadsheet particularly for that, but I don't know that you really need one. If we could set you up, LeanLaw will calculate all of those things. We'd have to set you up with a trial account if you wanted to do that, but that's what I would say. Okay, so that's the end of our story here. We're right on time here. So we're on the hour. So after this webinar, you're going to get an email, and it's going to allow you to review the slides and recording that we've seen. You've all received the report card. If you want to fill that out and send that back to me, I will send you a confidential analysis of that, areas you might be able to focus on for improvement. And then I'm always happy to book a strategy consultation if you have anything at all that you are struggling with in your firm. They're no cost and no obligation. And I just love to help law firms get better. So feel free to schedule a meeting with me. So I would love to be part of your firm's transformation. All right, any final questions before we sign off? All right, hearing none. Thank you, everybody. I really appreciated the let's see, we do have one other question that came up, which is, does producer compensation include bonuses and origination? All right, so we probably need to have a little chat about how you're using those terms. But usually, yes, the producer compensation, if we're just talking about, well, let's see, I'm not sure quite where you're pointing with that, but compensation is compensation. You can include an origination component and a bonus component, however that is calculated, even if that's just subjective. But schedule a little time with me if you want to go through that in more detail, so I can understand better what you're asking. All right, so thanks everybody, and we will sign off now, but really appreciate your attention and the opportunity to talk with you today.